What is up? I'm Outraged, the podcast live with you guys on YouTube right now. Thank you everybody who is going to tune in today. I have a great guest today. I'm super excited because me and this individual have gone back and forth on Twitter in the past, and I did his podcast not too long ago. I would say he's not a total troll in so many senses, but he is somebody that I have had a ton of people reach out to me privately with screenshots of things that he said, whether he knows it or not, and this totally cracks me up. Let me bring him on the screen as I attempt to say his name. You can find him on Twitter at Rotosurgeon, and it is Kev Mahserejian. Did I get it right?
Wow, that was actually like 90% of the way there. I'm very proud.
Can you say it once slowly for everybody?
Mahserejian.
Oh, wow. It was close. I think
you hit like right there.
Okay, well, that's a sweet spot. Like I told you off air, I had been like stressing this like over and over and over again all day. I was like, I'm not going to be able to say his name. Maybe I'll just say Kev and not say his last name and just blow by it. But I'm glad we got that out of the way because I think that's going to be the hardest part of this entire episode. Now, Kev, it's funny because as I'm saying that you cause controversy in some senses online, and the things that you say on there have stirred up some shit in the past. Just earlier today, you and Josh Larkey are going back and forth on Twitter about something. What was that about?
Well, he wanted to get it out there that he's advocating to drop Rashad Penny. I cannot believe it. I'm very much so still a Penny believer, and I know you like Kenneth Walker, and I'm not here to go bash on him, even though I have plenty. But it's week 3. We knew to sit Penny against San Francisco, arguably the best defensive front in the NFL, in a game script that was bound to be terrible. And Penny still got 40% of the snaps, and people say it's timeshare, but he got like 70% in week 1. Walker came back and he still played. It just he didn't get the touches because that wasn't the game to do it. But that's neither here nor there. Josh and I went back and forth. He's like, drop him, where this is not the time to drop Penny. You look at the waiver wire, the top ads on the waiver wire are like Kenyon Drake, Sony Michel, Brandon Bolden. You're going to drop Rashad Penny for what at this point?
Yeah. No, that's fair. Look, and I'm going to have Josh Larkey as a guest on this show here in a couple of weeks. So I happened to see it and I was like, of course. So I was like, Kev, look at this guy. He's like a Rottweiler off a chain. But, and it's not the first time on social media that you've called people out. I mean, you have a history of this. You've unearthed a couple of events, whether it's, people that are doing things that are deceitful, people that have made statements that they regret. I mean, where does this come from? You're almost more of a detective than Dave Kluge was referred to as.
Well, some of it comes to me. I'm not going to take all the credit when it comes to the, not tax, but it came to the charity leagues that were being frauded, which was an incredible feat by Huss the Prophet. I'll say his name. I'm not afraid of it. I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but he was frauding thousands, tens of thousands of dollars out of charity leagues. And there's no way I would know this because I wasn't involved with it. I didn't even play in the leagues. I wasn't getting frauded, but one of the members brought it up to me. I kind of threw it out there to other people who I know might have been involved. And you get one tweet that leads to another, that leads to another. And lo and behold, we basically dug up enough stuff that just drove him off Twitter. I think he still has his account, but he claimed to have these receipts. He claimed to be donating. And again, that was stuff that was brought to me. The Steffi Small stuff, she was coming at me, and honestly, that was probably the easiest quote unquote cancellation of all time because it took one search of a no word to get her out of the paint, per se.
Yeah, you've been involved. You've certainly been involved with a lot of the stuff. And I wasn't kidding when I led into the show and mentioned that I get DMs with your tweets more often than anybody. And you know what's funny for this episode, and people are going to figure this out in the future, when I was digging up hot takes and I searched your Twitter handle and I looked at the dates prior to the start of the season, I looked at a lot of your responses, and I got to be honest with you, you were deadly accurate on many of the statements that you made. Whether they were crass or not, your takes on players, whether it was injury-based or your thoughts on how a roster might break down, they were really accurate. And I found myself like thumbing through, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's like a prophet. I can't believe how accurate you were this offseason. I mean, do you remember some of the comments that you actually made?
I mentioned Sky Moore wouldn't be a starter. I mentioned Cam Akers would suck. I mentioned a couple things, but honestly, it's 2 weeks in. I'm not going to go victory lap much. I'm not going to go bring it back up. I did mention Amon-Ra St. Brown was a top 10 or top 12 dynasty wide receiver over Elijah Moore. And I feel like we can all agree at this point that Amon-Ra St. Brown's pretty much up there at this point. Like, you could argue Amon-Ra St. Brown like Michael Pittman, and you won't get a stray eye anywhere, right?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of funny to say it because when we get these guys with that sort of draft capital in their situation, we're going to definitely get to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I don't want to break it all down now. But I think we have reached a point where we can have that conversation based on the production that we've seen, and also based on the fact that guys like Devontae Adams, guys like Cooper Kupp that are age 29, 30 or older are starting to age themselves out a bit. So when we've got these precocious talents that are proving themselves on the field, it's like, at what point do we sort of go, look, age is going to catch up to these elite players, and this guy's just going to keep surging? And I think that right there for me is sort of the line. But productively, he's been incredible. And I certainly wasn't somebody who was a believer in the beginning, because a lot of my process, draft capital, opportunity, these things do get factored in. And we look at last year and he was very productive, and it's like, all right, can we make the argument again? And we looked at the players in this lineup, which is exactly a point that you made. You said, look at the guys, who's holding him back, right? That's kind of the thought. It's like, who in this offense is going to hold him back? And at this point, Jameson Williams is about the only player that could emerge that might eat into that target share. But one comment that I made in the offseason was the fact that he's running out of the slot really does insulate him a ton, because there is no competition out of the slot for him. And here we go again. It's 2022 and he's on fire. So I think top 10, I think people would say it's bold, but I don't think it's that bold. And at some point, it may not be bold at all. But we will get into Amon-Ra St. Brown. So don't empty all your rounds at me right now. But I wanted to ask you, in your bio, it says that you work for Fox Sports. Do you do content at Fox Sports?
No, so I do media. So I work on the video side. I help them out with that. It's very much so like an office gig more than it is like a content gig, where you have like ESPN Fantasy, Yahoo Fantasy, CBS, NBC, whatever, all that great stuff. I would love to be involved with that side of things, but Fox doesn't really delve into fantasy anymore. I think they used to have the fantasy platform. I don't know if they still do, but that's not really what they're focusing on. And I'm just happy to be working there. I'm very, it's very cool to see the Fox studio sign driving in. And that just kind of makes my day every time I drive in, even though the work isn't as, like fantasy oriented as I'd like, as that I've been working on the last 5 years, but it is still really cool.
Yeah, it's, I had thought you made content there, but you have your own podcast, which I had mentioned I featured on the Operating Room. And when does that air?
Well, the Operating Room airs early every week, typically Tuesdays. It just depends on when guests are available. Like I know I mentioned to you, like, whenever you're free, I'm free, because I'd love to have people like you on my pod anytime. And I'm very appreciative that you did make the time. So it is very much so a guest driven pod first and foremost, because, I'm just happy to get anybody I get to talk to on.
I love it, man. No, it should be fun. And again, like I've tried to express to people that you don't just have takes that I think people think are too spicy. You're very well informed. You're very well calculated, very well researched. And that's what I appreciate, because oftentimes, as people are going to see on this episode, a lot of times people just say things without any data support. And it absolutely kills me. It pains me inside, because it's like, how can we come to a conclusion if we've done no research, if we haven't looked at the history of the data or the situation? So that's something that I definitely want to dive into today.
You've got mail.
But we're going to start with an email right now. This is important. We always have an email to start the show. Oftentimes it is to the guest. I want to see who it's to this week. It's to the podcast. Okay, it says, help. Now that Clyde Edwards is good again, is it okay to finally go outside again? Signed, a petrified Chiefs fan. Kev, has Clyde... Okay, listen, first off, before we do this, I had a sounder on this show that anytime someone said Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I had to hit it. So I'm going to retire it temporarily, and then I'm going to ask your question. I'm going to ask you this question, whether this is for real or Clyde Edwards is just a mirage. So for the last time, I hope, I'm going to play this sounder. I hope to God this is the retirement of that sounder, because I died defending Clyde Edwards. Please say something positive.
I mean, I'm in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I drafted him this offseason. I thought his cost was egregious for where he was going. Another one of those guys. The situation was Jerick McKinnon, who hasn't eclipsed 100 touches in a season in however long. Isaiah Pacheco, who to his credit is very good at pass blocking and fast, but he's not a very good runner. And Ronald Jones, who I have a personal soft spot for Ronald Jones, but it was obvious that he wasn't going to really be playing. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he is the guy. He's the starter. He looks like he's involved in the passing game as well. The touches haven't really been there because he's been so damn efficient.
Yes.
If he's not averaging 7-8 yards per carry or target or whatever he's been doing, I'm sure he's going to be getting more touches that kind of equal everything out. He's getting goal line work. I think he's for real, but he does get some tough matchups coming up. Gets the Colts this week, a top 5 run defense last year and this year, I believe. He gets the Buccaneers, and then he gets the Bills in a couple weeks. So, yes, Clyde's for real. Yes, he looks very good. He looks the best he's ever looked, but these matchups do get tough. And he's not the full-on pass-catching back. He is sharing that role somewhat. So it could be dwindling in terms of fantasy production, but usage-wise, I think we could see that spike up a little bit in the few next coming weeks.
So what you're trying to tell me is I may be able to actually retire the sounder. Can I retire it, or do you think I should keep it holstered for a little while longer?
I think you holster it and pray he doesn't get injured, because if he stays healthy, he's going to be like a fringe RB1, which you're going to take all day.
Okay, I love it, man. No, I'm excited. Look, I don't know if you remember the battles that I had on a previous podcast I used to be a part of called The Sonic Truth. I made a critical error. I chose Clyde Edwards over Jonathan Taylor, who has since become a rocket ship to the RB1 position. But this feels like redemption. So I really, really need this. And so does that Chiefs fan. But listen, Kev, the reason that I brought you on today is because we look at the preseason. There were a lot of takes. Some of them were calculated, many of them not. And we found them littered all over social media. So what I wanted to do with you today was expand on a segment that this show has called the social media call out. Normally I just do one, but today we're going to do, I don't know, 12, 15. There's a lot of them. So let's do the social media call out right now.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened.
All right, Kev, that's the lead. And look, I'm going to jump into this very first one because this one really grinds my gears. This was a player that I haven't really been a fan of since the beginning for a multitude of reasons. Here he comes again in Miami, gets the contract, all the faith in the world that this guy's going to pan out. And that player is, in fact, Chase Edmonds. Let's bring this up on the screen. Hot take from Josh Kellum. Hot take, Dolphins Chase Edmonds will be a top 10 running back in PPR. Now, here's the thing, Kev. The way that this was going to work was we were going to look at an old take and decide if it was just way out in left field or if there's a chance that it actually comes to fruition. Chase Edmonds, a top 10 runner. What do you think?
I think that was crazy from the jump, and I like Chase Edmonds. I bought him last year, and I was very disappointed. Obviously, he had the ankle sprain that didn't help, but yeah, there was no chance he was going to finish top 10. You were praying for top 15, like that fringe 15 level where, you know, his receptions and lack of touchdowns can kind of balance out, and like that's the high end of the production. But with Tyreek, with Waddle, with even Gesicki getting involved in the passing game, there's next to no chance without injury that this offense is going to be able to support him as a top 10 running back at any point. And I think that was crazy from the jump because the target share is going to be all Hill and Waddle, and then whatever sprinkles down is Edmonds and the rest.
Yeah, the narrative that I kept hearing was follow the money. And it's funny because I had some conversations with people because in a lot of the drafts I went into, it was Edmonds and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were sitting there. And my thought was I just didn't know what Edmonds' ceiling was. I really just couldn't fully commit in my mind that Edmonds was going to be this 20-touch-a-game guy because he just never was. And he was perpetually leapfrogged by whatever runner was in that offense with him. It's like no matter what season it was, he was getting usurped by somebody. Here comes the money, and Raheem Mostert is getting a ton of work. We've watched his snap share plummet. It's dangerous territory, so I think calling him top 10 is a bit crazy. I think that there was upside there, but you're exactly right. When we look at these wide receivers in this offense, and we saw last week them just air raided out on people, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. Let's look at one more right here. So this one right here came from who's pounding? I don't know who this is. This is a random guy, but he goes, holy fuck, Matt Ryan has become so underrated, laughing my ass off. And it's a 4-picture image with Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz, and Matt Ryan. Is he actually underrated at this point when juxtaposed to those other players?
I don't think it's crazy to take Wentz over Ryan rest of the season. I don't think it's crazy to take a healthy Jameis Winston. I mean, he had a busted back last week, so I don't think that's fair to really consider. But yeah, Matt Ryan's on the lower end of the quarterback scale. I think in theory, he could be better than 2021 Wentz, but 2021 Wentz was playing through like a litany of injuries. Overall, yeah, he's on the back end. We're looking at the Phillip Rivers Colts years for Ryan, which is pretty apt given that, Phillip Rivers. They keep doing this. They keep bringing in Band-Aids rather than going after a permanent solution. Like, obviously they had luck and they screwed themselves out of that situation. But yeah, Ryan is basically a game manager at best, and you're praying for him to keep Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman's value afloat. He's not really going to do much himself.
Yeah, it's been brutal because I look back at his production last year. Obviously he's going to target the hell out of Michael Pittman, but I looked at his production last year and I had faith. You look at the advanced passing metrics, you look at the opportunity coming into this season, ends up with a better offensive line, had one of the worst offensive lines previously, and just at this point really not getting it done, on a team that could lean heavy on Jonathan Taylor at any given moment. So is he underrated? I mean, he's 37 years old, going on 38 here soon, I believe. It's like, I think we've seen the extension of quarterback age go so much further than we ever expected. And so we're putting this faith in every single quarterback, one after another. And after 2 weeks, he doesn't look as good as expected. And I think in most fantasy drafts, he was going much later. So it's not like people were way out in front of their skis with this guy, but nonetheless, yeah, Matt Ryan is one of those players that I think at this point, I think Carson Wentz over him makes a ton of sense. So how about this one right here? Adam Koffler. Now, look, I follow him on Twitter. I like Adam. Okay, I like Adam. This was the social media post, and this is preseason. As you can see on 522, are we emotionally prepared for Amon-Ra St. Brown realistically being the third option on a more run-heavy Lions team than last season? Kev, where's your head at on that one?
I love Adam. Adam's a good guy. Follow Adam if you don't. But oh my God, I don't know how anyone came up with the whole Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be anything less than the first option on that offense after what we saw at the end of the year. Yeah, he's a 4th round pick, but that's just because he's not like the fastest guy. He's not really going to add to the offense, blah, 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 what they thought. But no, what he does out of the slot, what he does beating zone, he's an incredible piece for an offense. So it was crazy to think that before. It's even crazier to think now that Jameson Williams is going to come in and take his job, where they could be a complementary duo, but they can't be. I don't think Jameson Williams is going to usurp him at all unless Amon-Ra St. Brown gets hurt. And that's even if Jameson Williams hits his top end ceiling.
Yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown running out of the slot, kind of as I alluded to earlier, was one of the big things for me that was really going to basically save and potentially continue to propel the production that we had seen the year prior. Now, admittedly, when you see a guy that over the stretch of 7 weeks or so, 6 weeks, puts up the numbers that he put up with guys that were hurt around him, you can create the narrative that there was injury that, had been infused into this opportunity. But then again, we're seeing the reality of that situation in 2022. And I think in 2021, I could have made the argument that it was hard to really tell if this player was just great or if the opportunity was being funneled to him, similar to Travis Fulgham. I mean, we saw Travis Fulgham get peppered like crazy in a very similar fashion, but clearly the talent profile between these two players is vastly different. And now we've entered 2022, and he's once again on a rocket ship trajectory. What is the average? 29.9 fantasy points per game right now, running 62.2% out of the slot, like you said, versus zone. He's been so good this year. And even when Jameson Williams does step onto the field, for sure, I think what we're going to see is probably the opportunity sustain like it has, but those deep shots might even be an advantage at this point, the more that we think about it, because it's going to add that dynamic that even DJ Chark is adding to the offense, but we know what Jamison Williams can do. I mean, at this point, you think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is arguably inside the top 10, correct?
Yes, he's very much so on the back end of a top 10. And I'm not going to fight anyone if someone wants to put like a veteran who's better, like a Stephon Diggs or whomever it may be, who's just like, obviously players in their prime compared to players at a younger age who are producing almost similarly. I'm not going to nitpick over that, but yeah, I think he's on the back end of a top 10 in Dynasty. Redraft, I mean, I don't want to say he was too mispriced because obviously the Goff offense, we didn't really know what was going to happen, but yeah, it's looking like we should have been drafting him even higher than the 6th round.
I mean, I'm going to have to eat some crow somewhere on some podcast because, again, like, as I mentioned, my process and looking at these guys that are later round picks. And again, as you mentioned, I mean, he was a good enough athlete, and we know that speed is overrated at the wide receiver position. That's been proved time and time and time again. But coming into 2022, my faith was halfway there. And at this point, I mean, I'm all the way in, but if you're halfway in entering 2022, you probably don't own him in very many places. You know what I mean? It's like my ownership of Amon-Ra St. Brown is not much. And later I have a trade scenario for you that includes Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I'm really going to test your faith in him as well. Let's look at one more right here. Andrew Erickson, another good social media user on Twitter. He was looking during the preseason, said, running back Travis Etienne of the Jaguars. We got a taste of what his eventual role could be. Looking at his first preseason action, featured an 88% snap share, 50% opportunity share, and work on third downs plus red zone. The essential elite fantasy running back usage. That has not necessarily come to fruition because, ta-da, James Robinson is alive and well and eating up a ton of workload. What is your level of faith in Travis Etienne, and can he still be elite in this offense?
Not this year while James Robinson is kicking, but I think later on in his career, maybe next year, year after, he could definitely be in that top 5 conversation, given his skill set, given his explosion. I wasn't buying in 1 year post Lisfranc, given the history of that injury. Obviously, James Robinson is bucking the trend of Achilles, but that's still, we'll see how long it keeps up. He has less than 4 yards per carry, but it's clear that they want to use James Robinson in this offense. And if Etienne's snap share went down from week 1 to week 2. You don't really like to see that happen regardless of game script. He played fewer than 40% of the snaps. And man, it could be really annoying this year with Etienne and Robinson because you might not know which week to start them. Obviously, you would hope you don't have both. You have one or the other. But yeah, I don't see the upside without a Robinson injury for Etienne this year. But next year, yeah, by all means, I think Etienne's upside is of whatever we expected.
So, yeah, because when we think about it from a dynasty perspective, James Robinson is coming to the end of his contract with Jacksonville. And, if I'm Jacksonville, it probably makes a lot of sense to re-sign James Robinson. But if James Robinson is no longer in Jacksonville, you could see Travis Etienne as a potential RB1 out of this backfield.
Yeah, I look at it the way Javonte Williams, we viewed him pre and post Melvin Gordon signing. Where you're like, okay, he's now RB 12, 13 rather than top 5 as he would have been sans Melvin Gordon. But right now, yeah, for the rest of the season, it's very tough to view Etienne even as an every week starter, honestly. And that sucks to say considering that he was drafted as a 4th round pick, almost universal. He was late 2nd round in high stakes draft. I just remember that. So, yeah, you're kind of stuck chewing, biting the bullet, not chewing the bullet. My bad.
You can chew a bullet if you want. I'd
prefer not to.
Teeth. Yeah, but I mean, okay.
Yeah.
You look at Trevor Lawrence, and I lean pretty hard into the fact that Trevor Lawrence led the NFL in check down rate last season. That there was this chemistry. I mean, admittedly, the injury. And it seems like when I was digging back on some of your tweets, one thing that you leaned into pretty heavily was your stance on these significant injuries. I mean, have you played that way for a long time, or what sort of made you turn the corner on sort of avoiding these guys at duration? And you even mentioned with some of the injuries that you had a range, 12 to 18 months was the expectation, for recovery time.
I mean, I listen to actual medical professionals. My @ is rotosurgeon. I'm not medically licensed whatsoever. It's like, I'm a doctor of fantasy, whatever. No.
There you go. Sure.
But when it comes down to it, I listen to the actual PTs, MDs, whatever on Twitter, and I kind of converge their data, inside injuries on The Athletic. There's some great info on there as well. I listen to them. I see ACL recovery. The prime timeline is 18 months post-recovery, so that's typically 2 years, basically. Achilles, we've never really seen it. Lisfranc, I think Darren McFadden, 4 years after he tore his Lisfranc, he was like the only fantasy-relevant running back. Again, the samples are not that big, but at the same time, these are bets you're making. Every pick in fantasy is a bet. So do I want to make a bet on a player that we've never seen succeed post this injury? Do I want to make a bet on a healthy young player who we just saw be extremely explosive and might not be on the same offense or a same caliber offense, but he's healthy? So, right. When it comes down to sports, this is my last thing on it. When it comes down to sports, every athlete in the NFL, in the NBA, in the MLB is great. I don't think that's hard to say. But when an injury comes into play, your pedigree has to take a knock. You are now a step below someone who is fully healthy, even if you might have been ahead of them prior to that, even at a significant margin. That is a knock. That even mental toll it takes on a player is a knock. So I definitely do consider severe injuries into my evaluations, unless there is a proper time frame that these medical professionals did say, we're past that and they should be fully healthy.
Yeah, it's tough because, I play a lot of Dynasty, and you're probably aware of that. So I would say it's more easy in seasonal to go, I'm off this guy. I'm not touching him this year at cost. It doesn't make sense coming off the injury. But in Dynasty, guys like Jameson Williams, he got hurt before you even got to your rookie draft. And so you're like, what do I do with him? He gets the draft capital. He goes to this particular situation. And you kind of have to make an estimation. And I guess to your point, we're just looking at it like potentially lost time. But if you're trading for a player, if you're trying to buy the dip, whatever it may be, you have to go about it a little bit differently. But I like your take on it because I think you need to be rigid on some of these health takes, especially in seasonal. So I still have a ton of faith in Travis Etienne, but James Robinson coming back and looking the way he has surprises the hell out of me. And do you do any of this 1-for-1? James Robinson's going to make it, so Cam Akers is going to make it. is this a game that you play?
We've seen Cam Akers. Cam Akers does not look good. He didn't look good in the playoffs. He doesn't look good now. And, you could say, PFF graded him out well or whatever the take is. But no, he looked terrible. You look at Darrell Henderson in that offense. You look at Cam Akers. It looks like one is an NFL running back and one is a guy they feel bad for that they're giving touches. So I don't think it's a 1-for-1 scenario. If James Robinson does return from his Achilles and look similar to what he's looked like, if this doesn't degrade or whatever, because, he hasn't been perfect, but he's been good enough. Yeah, I can use James Robinson as a precedent set for future running backs returning from Achilles in a proper timeline.
I love it, man.
But also, you also have Cam Akers, who you're like, okay, that's a cautionary tale. So now you have both, and you're like, okay, it's not always going to hit, but it could hit more likely than we thought before. So
yeah, it's tough, man. And then you look at the history. We've got some older players in that mix. It's an age thing. It's an effort thing. And we've talked about this before, the idea that Cam Akers came back so fast. Like, it's hard to believe that the player on the field that we're seeing, because I've heard reports, and I talked about this on the last podcast, that they feel like he's not putting in the effort. It's not even about the injury anymore. It was like an effort conversation. And whatever it is, he may be mailing it in. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But he's certainly a tough guy to chase in seasonal. And he's even more difficult in Dynasty when you're going to put picks or assets on the line that you may never get back. Let's move to somebody else, though. Let's move on to this one. This is a good one. J.E. Mart. Chris Olave has potential to become the number one receiver for the Saints, especially if Michael Thomas continues to struggle with being healthy. Even with Thomas healthy, Olave can surpass him. We've seen Olave get a ton of air yardage, ton of opportunity, first-round draft pick. With Michael Thomas playing the way he is there any chance Olave does surpass him?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with Jameis Winston at quarterback, a quarterback we know who loves to air it out. He had, 335 air yards to Olave this last week. Yep. Olave's been more efficient. Olave's target share is just a tick below Michael Thomas's. So I think it's very valid that Olave, in terms of season long, can surpass Michael Thomas. Maybe it doesn't happen this week or next, but he improved from week 1 to week 2. and he's the most explosive player on this offense. Michael Thomas, he's had touchdowns kind of save him these past 2 weeks. He hasn't really been the best. He's been fine, and obviously touchdowns are good, but yeah, I'm not going to rule it out. I think Olave can definitely surpass him, but would I bet on it? Would I say that's the most likely scenario? No, but it's possible. It's like, I'd say 30-ish%.
Yeah, the thing for me was with Michael Thomas and with Jarvis Landry, we knew that they were going to be playing in the slot. We knew that they were going to be playing short area routes. So Olave was always going to be the field stretcher. Olave was always going to be the guy that, took the top off. And Jameis Winston was not good as a passer last year. So there was a concern about what does Jameis Winston look like this year? But from what we've seen, and air yardage sort of being the indicator of what, big possibilities can happen, it's hard to imagine that Chris Olave, doesn't come damn close, if actually past Michael Thomas this season. Because I think that probably felt like a hot take for some people, thinking that Michael Thomas is going to continue to be the guy that he has been. And if the volume is there, it's possible. I think he's averaging a little over 8 targets per game right now. That's under what he used to have. But nonetheless, if Thomas continues to play the way he is, I think it'll be a little closer. It's going to require the connection on some of these deep balls. But for Olave to pass him, it's possible. Does it happen this year? I'm not fully sold on that without an injury to Michael Thomas. I mean, that's just my personal take on it. You think it could happen without an injury?
Yeah, I think it happened without an injury. Like, Olave had 13 targets this last week, and that was his second game ever in the NFL. So I'm going to go on record and say it's very possible this season. Again, not the most likely, not more likely to happen than Thomas surpassing him. But again, their efficiency, Olave's been more efficient on a per target basis. Target shares are nearly equal. Again, 2 games, this can all change in two more games. But when it comes down to it, from what we've seen, Michael Thomas hasn't been the healthiest player last year and a half. So honestly, I love Olave. I'd be buying him if anybody's selling. Thomas too, obviously he looks good. But I still have my reservations on him.
I love the 2-week sample. It's just enough to make you tilt, right? It's not enough to say anything conclusively, but it's just enough to drive you absolutely fucking crazy. So I love it. I think I love it for this take. So let's look at another one right here. Davis Maddock. This is one right here. One of my biggest conviction plays as we get closer to the season. Kyle Pitts is completely unstoppable if the Falcons can even be within sniffing distance of league average offense. Kyle Pitts has been one of the guys that people are ringing the alarm on, and I had kind of a Twitter stream last night on Kyle Pitts as I started to go back and look at some of his advanced metrics. But Kyle Pitts has not looked unstoppable this year, and that's not a knock on Davis Maddock. I mean, this is a generational talent in a lot of ways, but he has not performed this year. Does it get back on track? What's the deal here?
I think it's very much so defenses are shading towards Pitts while leaving London wide open, and that's going to change as defenses start to respect London more. I don't really have stats on it, but last year we saw with Mark Andrews, I think Frank Amarante, a good buddy of mine at I know you're not a big fan, but F Amarante TFG on Twitter.
He blocked me. How can I be a big fan? He blocked me. It was cowardice.
Well, okay, let's say you're more neutral now than anything, but he mentioned that Mark Andrews, even last year, started off cold. He had about 77 yards or so through the first 2 games, and then he ended up TE1. Kyle Pitts, it's been 2 weeks. Teams are like, this is the guy. There aren't that many guys on this team. Olamide Zaccheaus, I don't want to butcher his name.
Olamide Zaccheaus, yeah.
Olamide Zaccheaus.
His name is easier than yours is.
That's unfortunate, but I'm used to it by now. Kadarrell Hodge, another toughie. These guys, there's not much on this offense aside from Pitts that was really known. So I think defense is keyed on him. But London, I don't think London's going to be running free the rest of the season. I think his time is going to come to where the rookie wall, quote unquote, hits him and Pitts opens up. So I think Pitts is going to be fine. He's going to eclipse 1,000 yards. He's going to have close to 10 touchdowns. He's going to be fine. I don't think he's a top 2 tight end, but very well could finish as tight end 3.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about with the dog. Now she's going nuts. All right, so I was digging into the Kyle Pitts stats yesterday, and we're seeing him block at a rate that's way in excess of what we saw last year. 2.7% blocking downs last year, 14.3% this year. So we've seen an absolute increase there, being used a little differently through two games, 10 targets, 8 yards after the catch. So it's not the guy that I think people had expected to see, but the guy put up over 1,000 yards as a rookie. He did stuff at an age, at a position that's basically never been done before since 2011 with Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, he's in rare air. So we shouldn't be too worried about him. In addition to the fact that if anybody believes that Mariota is the future quarterback of this offense, you're absolutely crazy. This is not the end for this team. So he doesn't look unstoppable this year. I like the take of him being shaded and that probably being the reason why Drake London's maybe seeing what he's seeing. So I'll be interested to see if that changes. But yeah, Pitts is not the guy that people expected. But I also think he was overdrafted in Dynasty. People were taking him in non-tight end premium. He was going 101 in drafts, in super flex drafts with no tight end premium. People were taking him at 101. And they were saying this publicly, saying, look, I'm taking this guy. I've got faith in him. Like, I don't know what you expected, but most tight ends don't break out till age 24, age 25. Go look at all these guys. And on the blocking downs subject, I tweeted this out last night. So you've got Kyle Pitts, who's blocking at a rate of 14.3%. Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce combined have 0 blocking downs this season. So they haven't had to block once. That hasn't been their role at all. They're just going out and catching passes. So hopefully we see that for Kyle Pitts in the future. But he certainly does not look unstoppable right now. Here's one, because I argued against this all offseason. This is from Womack at The Truman Show 89. Per sources, Malik Willis will be the starter for the Titans week 1 versus the Giants. I can confirm that he was not the starter in week 1, short of last week when they got the brakes beaten off of them. When do you think we might see Malik Willis? Do you think we see him at all this year if Tannehill is playing competently?
No, unless it's week 18 and they either clinched a playoff spot or they did not make the playoffs, and it's pretty much clear. Malik Willis is not going to play. He's not good. I think he's a fun concept, but he has like no fundamental quarterback skills. And I'm no quarterback guru, but I can even see that when I watched his Liberty tape. You know, it's fun. He's electric. He has a strong arm, but like everything else in between is dysfunctional. He overthrows. He's basically like a worse version of Josh Allen when he came into the league. And like he didn't get drafted top 8 in the NFL. Right. So he's not going to get an opportunity unless he somehow sees a Tannehill injury. And then even then the team might just sign a quarterback who can lead their offense. So Malik Willis is a project and he's going to remain one. I don't see him playing until maybe his 3rd year. I view him as Kellen Mond essentially. And Kellen Mond just got cut. So it's very much so like an electric player, just not one that is going to be an NFL quarterback without like everything breaking right for him or him getting groomed to be that years down the line.
You nailed it, because Kellen Mond was my exact scenario when I brought up a year ago when everybody was like, oh, Kirk Cousins better watch his back. Kellen Mond, you know, he's got this particular profile, and Kellen Mond's profile from a production standpoint certainly looks better than what we saw from Malik Willis, a player who admitted that he wasn't trying, he wasn't studying the playbook when he was at Auburn. Then he goes to Liberty. By the way, nobody dares like calculate the fact that is just like the worst opponents. It's like the worst strength of opponent you could possibly face. And he still threw a bunch of interceptions and still made errant throws, and just, he never looked like a generational prospect. And I showed mercy on many people who put the word generational and said he was a top 3 pick on social media. I avoided those posts. This was a charitable effort, but the fact that people called him generational, and I love that you said year 3, because look, he almost got passed on for 3 full rounds in the NFL draft. It's not like people didn't go scout him. It's not like people didn't know who he was or know his profile or get to see him physically perform. A lot of teams said way too much of a project. Even with Jalen Hurts doing what he does, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these mobile, capable quarterbacks, every team in the NFL, and every team can use backups. Every team could probably, many teams could use a starter. They go, no, thank you. And it wasn't until this one. And Tannehill has been good. I mean, Tannehill has been damn good, all things considered, in a run-first offense. This year, obviously, things look a little bit different. But when I was hearing generational about Malik Willis, I wanted to fucking barf, Kev. I'm telling you, I wanted to barf, because isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard?
I think if you want to say his like athleticism or his arm strength, sure, maybe I wouldn't go generational, but I'd say it was amazing. But you look at it, people say, oh, Joe Burrow transferred too. Joe Burrow transferred from Ohio State to LSU. Yes. Malik Willis transferred from Auburn to Liberty. He didn't go from a Power 5 to a Power 5 top 5. Well, Auburn's not a top 5 school anymore, but an SEC school to like a Big Ten, whatever. He went to a Group of 5 school, Liberty, where he didn't even perform that. He wasn't putting up like 5,000 yards at Liberty. He was looking good, obviously, but he was playing, a future milkmen and garbage boys. Like, he wasn't playing anyone he's ever going to play in the NFL.
Can you
know what I
please call
mean?
them refuse collectors?
You know what I mean.
Damn,
But at the end of the day,
name.
respect
Lord.
the profession.
Yeah,
no, but Malik Willis isn't happening unless everything breaks right in his development, and that's not happening anytime soon.
That's fair. Look, blitzing buzzer. What if I told you I have screenshots of Nate hyping up Malik Willis pre-draft? It's a goddamn lie. You know it's a lie. You can't find one. You can scrub the whole internet. You won't find one. But I'm so happy you said year 3 because I don't even hear people saying that. When Malik Willis went into that game, everybody was like, here it is. Tannehill's never putting the cleats back on again, or he's going to become new clipboard Jesus, but it didn't happen, and I'm thankful for that. All right, so here we go. This one I wrote, Siri, show me conviction. Dom Cinturino, I think I said that right. I think it's hilarious that people are drafting Elijah Moore over Garrett Wilson. Riddle me this. Seasonal, and I think this is a seasonal take. Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, is that a hot take at all? Would you have taken Garrett Wilson over Elijah Moore coming into this?
Absolutely not. And I still think it's a hot take because obviously Elijah Moore has been kind of third fiddle to even Corey Davis and with Garrett Wilson. They both look great. Elijah Moore, he's been fine. He's averaging more yards per target than Garrett Wilson, but he is the known commodity on that offense, much like Kyle Pitts, where we're like, okay, this guy obviously looked fantastic as a rookie. He got injured. He missed some time, but Garrett Wilson, I don't think he's a better prospect than Elijah Moore was coming out. And Elijah Moore earned the target share on a per snap basis, per route, whatever you want to say. And he looked fantastic as a rookie. Mike White, whether it be Wilson, whomever it was, he was getting peppered with targets. So if you were to have drafted Garrett Wilson over Elijah Moore, I would have thought that was an insane take. Right now, it's closer. That gap has definitely shrunk.
Yep.
But when it comes down to it, if you want to say rest of the season, I'm still taking Elijah Moore. I still believe he's going to be fine. The offense is very odd right now, the way they are just playing from behind. This last game, I don't even know how they came back and beat the Browns. The Browns should have won that game, even though I did expect the Jets to win from the start, but that's neither here nor there. Elijah Moore's good. He's going to be fine, and I'd still take him over Garrett Wilson. But Garrett Wilson definitely has proven himself, and you could start him in a pinch if you need be.
Yeah, I love Elijah Moore, and I like Garrett Wilson too. I think they're both great players, but much like we saw with Amon-Ra St. Brown, we watched, prior to Elijah Moore not finishing his season, when his snap share started to get over that 70%, usage, we saw him turn in multiple top 10 outings, 4 top 25 games, 3 were inside the top 10. A couple of those games weren't with Zach Wilson. That was kind of the thing here. You said White. I think we had Flacco. It didn't really matter who the quarterback was, though, which was kind of one of the special parts of it. Irrespective of the QB, he was producing. He was getting open versus man coverage. That's a place where Zach Wilson was surprisingly successful last year. And on top of all the weird things you mentioned with this offense, the air quote franchise quarterback is not even running it right now. So I can't even tell you that what I see right now is fundamentally the offense going forward. Breece Hall getting all these targets, the usage of Garrett Wilson. I just don't know. All I know is Elijah Moore is truly talented. He proved it last year. And I have a ton of faith going into him this year as well. So I think we're on the same page. Top 15 Dynasty wide receiver. Is it possible that he's top 15 and Garrett Wilson's? Because this is on the backbone of Zach Wilson. So could either of these players be top 15?
No, absolutely. I had Elijah Moore around, I think, 13 or 14, if I recall correctly, before. I'd still have him around there, maybe 15 now, but that's not a big dip, if anything. That's just a minor 2-week change. But when it comes down to it, Garrett Wilson's the one you should be raising up, while Elijah Moore, just got to be patient. He's going to be fine. This is very much so a blip early in the season.
I fired the trigger there early. That's on me. Fantasy football counselor. I think you're well aware of him.
We love this guy. My God, the Instagram king.
Hot take machine. There is no way the Jags or any team would pay a player who has done nothing this much. Christian Kirk sucks. I haven't seen this madness since the time the Eagles paid Wentz the $128 million. Completely undeserving. That is a bad take, and it looks tragic at this point. I mean, Christian Kirk to me felt like one of the more obvious offseason buys. Even though his contract was big, wide receiver contracts are getting to that level. And maybe this was just the level of the faith in the Jacksonville Jaguars because he was the first guy to really get paid. I mean, everybody says that he sort of turned the wide receiver market in a way because his contract was so significant, but he's performed incredibly well to this point. Touchdowns, targets, everything. Do you agree?
100%. I've been on the Christian Kirk train. I loved him last year. This year, I was still a fan. His price did jump a little bit, but at the same time, it was just definitely someone who obviously talented. And what's most important is his usage. They've dropped his A dot down 2 yards, and that's just exploded his production because they're using him like A&M used him, basically as a yak receiver rather than a deep threat. He's not Hollywood Brown, and that's why Arizona traded for Hollywood Brown, a real deep threat, whereas Christian Kirk is just a weapon. You give him the ball and let him figure it out. That's what he's doing, and that's what he's going to continue doing. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's actually comfortable now in the pocket because he has a wide receiver one he can trust. The Jaguars look like geniuses right now. Honestly, is Christian Kirk underpaid? Should be the conversation we're having because you could say he's a top 20 to 25 wide receiver in the NFL right now.
I mean, pretty easily because this was the big question. Part of what was baked into Christian Kirk was the history of usage, as you mentioned, with Arizona, and then people's lack of faith in Trevor Lawrence. But suddenly, if Trevor Lawrence is competent, and if the Jacksonville, because the Jacksonville Jaguars were the first to really spend this level of money, people thought it was foolish. But who knows what Christian Kirk had cooking at the time, and who knows what their department analytics and scouting, they may have very well said, look, this is the guy. We can use him in these ways. Let's pay him. Let's get it done. This is the guy we want. And they did, and people thought it was ridiculous, but look at his contract versus some other players now. And as you said, it actually looks good at this point in time. Maybe he is underpaid because he looks incredible. And this is a guy that was a proven route, winner previously versus multitudes of coverage, and he was just underused. But to see him in a wide receiver one usage spectrum is just incredible because, the targets were a bit variable. Week 1, 12 targets. 6 for 117. Then in week 2, 6 for 6, but he goes for 78 yards, 2 scores, I think, in that game. So it was buoyed by some touchdowns, but nonetheless, this is a guy that is now, I think, top 7 in points per game, top 8 overall at the wide receiver position. And in Dynasty, man, I don't see this slowing down. And the advantage here is Kirk is not 26 years old yet. And there may be some people out there that still don't really believe it. I mean, do you believe that this is going to persist?
He has Lawrence. I mean, why wouldn't it persist? He's tied to I don't want to say elite because he's not there yet, but an elite prospect. And I would believe in him. I'd believe in Lawrence, obviously, more than Zach Wilson. So, Christian Kirk, Garrett Wilson could be a conversation someone wants to have going forward. Obviously, Garrett Wilson was a better prospect than Kirk, but Kirk's shown that he could harness a 25% target share in the past. I think he's done it almost multiple times. He did it very early in his career. He just had bad quarterback play early on, and then Kyler while he was figuring it out, and then he's had some injury history, but I don't see any reason why Kirk can't keep this up, and he's extremely young, too. He's, 25, 26?
Yeah, almost 26, so not even 26 yet. Just a smidge under 26. Yeah. He's still under there. There's a crack under the door. You can see some light coming through before age 26. But nonetheless, like you said, I love how you put it. We're finally letting him, get those yards after the catch, and that's something that was really special in his profile. Was underutilized. I mean, Arizona's been really screwing up the whole wide receiver usage. I don't know what's going on there, but to see Kirk flourish the way that he is, man, it makes me so happy because I was making videos in the offseason. I was banging the drum. It sounds like you were as well, that Christian Kirk was the guy, and it feels very obvious today. But I think a lot of people missed out. Now, you mentioned that you would take Trevor Lawrence over Zach Wilson. Can I take a question from the crowd? Jeremy Clark says, should we be buying Zach Wilson then? This is post-Jets wide receiver conversation.
Oh my God. I would never advocate to buy Zach Wilson, but if you could get him cheap after the injury, I guess. But it's not someone I believe in long-term. I don't think he's a good NFL quarterback. I think he could be up to fine, but I don't think he's ever going to be good. He could have good numbers buoyed by his amazing wide receivers. But I mean, Jalen Hurts is dealing with that right now as well. So yeah. Jalen Hurts runs at least. I would not be buying Zach Wilson for a long-term play, but if you buy him for a short-term cheap off the injury and plan to sell after the season, why not?
I like it, man. Oh, hey, look at this one here. Andrew, come on. Who put the baby face filter on Kev, man?
The mustache. It's the mustache.
Is that
I don't
what
have
does
it anymore.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't seen you we podcasted months ago, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
know. But you shaved the mustache, and this is why you're getting the babyface commentary?
Yeah, I lost a bet. I'm a Rams fan. My buddy Bill's a Bills fan. So I was like, oh, I'll take the Rams. You take the Bills. One of us shaves a mustache. I lost. Obviously, the Rams lost. So here I am.
Good for you, man. I put a tweet out last night. Did you see this? It was like Southwest Airlines gave a ukulele to every passenger on their flight from like Texas to Honolulu. And they had an instructor and they were playing music the whole way. And I thought, and I put like something like point of view. You took last place in your fantasy league. Like that would be fucking torture listening to a bunch of random people playing a ukulele on an airplane for, I don't know, how long's a flight from Texas? 6 hours? It's a long time.
Yeah. No, dude, I saw that TikTok. I saw the video of it, not just the tweet you put out. But my God, I'd be miserable. Like you would literally have to, you could end me on that flight and I'd be more content than dealing with ukulele.
It's not good. All right. Let's move to the next one here. Kev, it's you. This is yours.
You got my ass.
This is you. We got one from Kev. Kev, Rashad Penny is one of the 10 most talented rushers in the NFL. He's good enough to overcome a bad offensive line and quarterback situation this year.
And I stand by it.
Okay, fair enough.
It's only been 2 games. It's been 2 games, and last week, nobody should have been starting him versus SF. As I mentioned, Rashad Penny, anyone versus the SF front who's not a Jonathan Taylor is going to have a bad time. And Rashad Penny still played 40% of the snaps. He didn't get the touches because it was a bad game script. But yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not going to sell him or drop him or whatever after one bad game against the team we knew he was going to struggle against. Yes, the Falcons this week, the Lions the week after. I'm expecting to combine 250 yards through these next 2 games and a couple touchdowns. So you should get his valuable buoy back. And I think he should return value on his investment. It's looking like he might not be a win at cost, which is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, he went pick 120 at the initial cost. He jumped up to the 70s, where that's where even I was out. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay for Rashad Penny like that because obviously his injury history, but he was going behind Ken Walker in the offseason, and I was drafting him all day long. Once he spiked, he was going ahead of Kirk, Ayuk, those not high end, but those high upside wide receivers where I was like, okay, in a PPR league, I'm taking those guys all day.
I mean, on any given week, those guys that you mentioned could fire. And in addition to that, they're one injury away from being the number one in that offense for any number of weeks. So I totally understand it, especially at cost. I mean, as you know, look, Seattle fan, had Danny Kelly on the show. Obviously, I like Kenneth Walker as well. Had Danny Kelly on the show, and we talked about this, and the belief was that Rashad Penny was going to get every opportunity to be the guy this year, right? We don't know what their future looks like beyond this. Seattle's going to step into 2023 with a substantial amount of cap space. So as much as a Kenneth Walker fan that I am, the assumption that maybe Rashad Penny isn't a part of this roster next season, I don't know. I don't know what their plans are. But when you take a guy like Kenneth Walker in the second round, I mean, it's a pretty big indicator of future potential usage. We've only seen him in 1 week so far. Obviously, the snap share was very low. Again, you mentioned it, really tough defense to face. So I'm certainly not out on Rashad Penny, and I'm definitely not out on Rashad Penny out of fear of Kenneth Walker, because Rashad Penny has proven, when given an opportunity, like a real opportunity, he just crushes time and time again. But it's sort of yet to be determined with Geno Smith at quarterback, because the threat of the deep ball, the threat of Russell Wilson's explosive capabilities are sort of gone. So it'll be interesting to see how defenses sort of play Penny and this offense in the future. But Geno looked competent in week 1, so maybe he looks competent, a few other weeks here and there. But where do you think Rashad Penny finishes over the rest of the year? Is Rashad Penny a top 15 running back?
No, I never had him as a top 15 running back in terms of upside even. I had him top 20. In that 19-20, that's where he could land. That's almost where I projected him. But my thought process is, if you're holding him, if you're starting him, you're expecting a solid RB2, which he was going free early on in draft season, in underdog especially, where he was going pick 120. If you get an RB2 out of your 120th overall pick, you're very happy. And that's kind of what I'm expecting. And he's going to give you these weeks. He can give you spike weeks, as we saw at the end of last season. And my call is that they want to get as much juice out of him as they can, and then move on to Kenneth Walker next year.
Oh, look at this right here. So blitzing buzzard again. So did Seattle burn a second-round pick for a backup? Well, in 2022, they've got insurance. Here's one thing I can tell you. Similar to the San Francisco 49ers, Seattle has had a brutal running back history with injuries. Like Pete Carroll has talked about this to ad nauseum. They're constantly like churning the bottom of the barrel for running back support. You've got a 1-year deal for Rashad Penny. Like you mentioned, I believe next year is the year that we see Kenneth Walker in his full abilities. I hope that we see some of that pass catching prowess, because I know that was the big knock, right? I think there would be more concern for Rashad Penny had Kenneth Walker had this dynamic pass-catching profile. I think that is part of the reason that he's being a bit suppressed, because the assumption is Penny is the better pass catcher. The assumption is that Penny is probably today the better runner. But from the limited times that I got to see Kenneth Walker the other day, he looks juicy, man. It looks like there's some juice there, and I think we're going to get to see some special stuff this year. But I'm with you. I think it's not till next year. Now, before I go to this last tweet, because I know I'm going to get fried, I got to thank Joel for the super chat donation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, for the super chat donation. All right, so let's get to this last one, because I've got a feeling that you're not the only guy that got called out this week, Kev. And naturally, it's my turn to get roasted as I brag. I just took Marlon Mack at the 15.7 in a Dynasty startup. With runners like these still on the board, give me the potential lottery ticket on a shallow Houston depth chart. Ronald Jones, Chuba Hubbard, Gus Edwards, Keontae Ingram. Kev, was this a huge mistake?
I mean,
give it to me straight. No, don't pull punches, Kev.
I again, it's the injury thing. I was like, if Marlon Mack can't get it, I mean, obviously this was after the fact. Dameon Pierce took his job, basically. He got him fired. But even before the fact, I didn't expect Marlon Mack to do much this year. And over those guys, it's not your 15th pick in a draft isn't going to be a killer. I'm not going to roast you over a marginal running back who could start for you maybe 2 weeks out of the year at most.
Yeah, the Dameon Pierce thing, I like Dameon Pierce, but you know what, to be honest with you, I couldn't have projected Rex Burkhead. Didn't know Rex Burkhead was going to be the king of this backfield. Had no idea. Here I am getting burnt. Obviously, Dameon Pierce is the guy and will be the guy at least through this season. On the Dameon Pierce subject, because obviously you're a fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but we've seen him produce. Dameon Pierce has that 4th-round draft capital. Players like that don't often sustain in the league, but from what we saw in the preseason, sort of the team's signals around him, is he a guy that in Dynasty you think could be the guy into 2023 and maybe beyond?
I think if he stays healthy, absolutely. I think the team will trust him. It's very much so like, the Michael Carter thing where people are like, oh, people believed in Michael Carter and now look at him, Breece Hall is there. Well, Michael Carter got hurt last year. He doesn't really have the body of a workhorse running back, whereas Dameon Pierce looks like he could be that lead back who, with a complementary pass catching back like a JD McKissick type, could be the lead running back for a potentially good offense if they get their quarterback this offseason, whether it be CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, or if there's a breakout quarterback we don't know about yet. I'm looking at Dameon Pierce. I think he could be the starter for Houston going forward. They've had Arian Foster in that offense before he was undrafted. They had him as the lead guy, and he wasn't the best profile either, but he worked out. I think Dameon Pierce is good. I think his pass catching can go up, but he'll never be a perennial RB1. But he could have an RB1 season if he lucks into a bunch of touchdowns, I guess.
Well, it's going to be hard to imagine Houston getting him there, but I got to give a shout out. Thank you, Kev Wheeler. Matt could end up a league winner on San Francisco. Kev's shaking it. Kev versus Kev. Kev, respond to Kev.
Jordan Mason is better than Marlon Mack right now. They signed Tevin Coleman. I think Tevin Coleman right now is better than Marlon Mack is, and he's on the practice squad. But nevertheless, I'm looking at this like Marlon Mack is he's dust. You can't really be doing much with him. I guess if he's on your roster, you hold him if it's deep enough. But at the end of the day, Jeff Wilson looked solid too. Like there's no reason to think Jeff Wilson's going to lose his job to Marlon Mack. And then Jordan Mason, I want to see what he can do. And I don't think the team's going to give Mack opportunities over Mason unless Mason's like fumbling.
Okay, so then that leads me to another question as I'm segmenting around here. Elijah Mitchell gets hurt for a substantial amount of time. This is a guy that's got late round draft capital. If you're an Elijah Mitchell owner, how concerned are you about his long term?
Oh, I'm petrified of Elijah Mitchell long term because his injury history is pretty vast. He had a Liz Frank injury early on in his career. I forgot what college he went to in the South, but he definitely had an injury. He played throughout his college career. He got his snaps, he got his touches, and then he was hurt last year. He's hurt again this year, significant injury. So when it comes down to it, Elijah Mitchell owners should be panicking. If he comes back and he performs well, I'd be looking to sell, honestly.
I love it, man. And I'm going to continue to bring up anybody that says Marlon over all those names. He is saying Marlon Mack over everybody that you mentioned in San Francisco. Kev, tell Nephew Hustle the truth here. Do you believe that's false?
Marlon Mack couldn't beat out Rex Burkhead and Dameon Pierce for an RB, or he couldn't even get an RB3 role in Houston, the worst team in the league.
God,
I don't know why
man.
San Francisco is going to use him at all. They can mix him in. He could get touches because they love to use like a bunch of running backs. But when it comes down to it, unless literally Mason and Wilson also die on the field, there's no chance Max is going to get a workhorse role or anything close to a fantasy relevant role.
That sounds low probability if we're betting on on-field death. But I want you to know that these takes that you have about Marlon Mack are like bullets that have ricocheted and hit me based on the take that led us into this. I mean, inadvertently, you did cut me down. I mean, this is, and I respect it.
Death by a million cuts, but some of us need to take our medicine sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That was a big mistake. But like you said, 15.7, not a big deal. All right, Kev, I want to ask you a Dynasty trade question. We've done a little bit of Dynasty on the show. So let's do a deal breakers right now. I'm going to let it just run itself out.
I like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gets you into the flow. All right, so let's look at this trade that I've got right here. Garrett Wilson and a 2023 second-round rookie pick, or Amon-Ra St. Brown and a 2023 first. Now, here's the problem. You clearly are a huge fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Huge believer. So at this point now, I feel like this is going to be an easy one for you. This is just easy, right?
Yeah, no, honestly, this is kind of, you would have to flip the first and the second for this to be a fair trade, because getting Amon-Ra and a first for Garrett, and that's crazy right now, because Amon-Ra St. Brown's value should be in Dynasty a first plus a high upside player.
This is a trade that I recently had submitted to me by somebody, and they were asking about this trade. Yeah, absolutely. Amon-Ra St. Brown is playing electric. Now, even if that's a late first and an early second and they're close, that still changes nothing, right? Because Amon-Ra St. Brown has played just so well to this point. I'm going to have to check for my tweets, Kev, because I feel like I really shit the bed on some of these tweets with Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I didn't address them on this show, but I guess if you search, you probably wouldn't find any because I was too scared to even really tweet about Amon-Ra St. Brown. So nonetheless, all right, Kev, listen, here's the deal. The end of this show, I always do a game called 3rd and 20. Okay, you're semi-familiar with this game, correct?
Yes, I think you explained it to me sparingly, but I got the gist of it.
Okay, so here's how it works. I'm going to do 3 questions, 20 seconds, $500 on the line. I always open this briefcase up incorrectly, Kev, so let me open this thing up real quick. Let's get this thing. It's probably upside down again because I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, here it is. It's all there, Kev, in all of its glory.
I believe you. It's like deal or no deal.
It's like deal or no deal. But all you have to do is get this right. All right, we're going to start with 3rd and 20.
And he misses it. That's impossible. Oh, my God. That is impossible.
All right, Kev, this is people have bitched at me in the past for how I administer this game. So I'm going to make sure I ask the first question before I hit the button and give you your opportunity. Here we go. Do you wear T-shirts in the pool?
No.
Timer didn't start. What the French toast? Oh, this is not good. Okay, hold on. But now I don't even know how to play this game now. Now I'm going to have to change it. Oh, this is brutal.
$500. It's a damn shame.
This is typical. Hold on. Oh, and then it times out on its own. All right, we're going to try this. The timer went off. You lost. I mean, that's just the rules of the game. I couldn't get the rest of it.
Is this why everybody loses? You can't even start the game on time?
Well, listen, you know what? I restarted this computer. I got everything all set up. This always happens to me. All right, we're going to start this over again. What's your favorite food?
Ribs.
It fucking didn't start again.
Amazing.
You know, Kev, I don't know what to say right now. I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed. and there's nothing that I can do about it.
Is this a me problem? Did I do it? Did my face break the machine?
I don't know what happened. I can't even explain what's going on. I feel like maybe, oh, for God's sakes. All right, we're going to try this one more time. I'm going to try to manually administer this. This is not going well. Oh, yeah, people are saying in the crowd right now, they're saying this is when Nate loses his money. Apparently the game is now 2nd and 15 after all these screw-ups. Oh, I got to come up with a new question. All right, we're going to try this again. If this doesn't work, Kev, I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to have a shot at the money.
It's all good. I that's what work is for, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good idea because I'll have to do more work if you win. All right, I hope this works. What is your hat size?
7
Didn't work.
and
It doesn't
1/8.
matter. It doesn't matter what it is.
It's all good.
It doesn't matter. Well, this is unbelievable. I'm so sorry that this game is not going to work out for you. The question I was going to ask you on the third one, you know what? I'll make this fair. I'm going to ask you the question. If you do get it right, you still win, even though this game's not working, and this is fucking unbelievable. How many career sacks has Ben Roethlisberger taken?
Oh, like a specific number?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Don't you Google it.
God.
What are you doing?
I'm not Googling. I'm thinking because he doesn't take a lot of sacks. So my guess is throughout a 15-year career or about 15 years, am I almost out of time or what?
Oh, you'd be out of time by now, but that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you
a freebie.
320.
It's 554. Kev Wheeler, I did give him the final question. Yeah, listen, I'm going to hit the button again and see if this works.
Yeah,
Son of a bitch. Wow. Well, you know what? This is, you know what? It's probably you, to be honest with you. It's worked for everybody else.
Yeah, it has to be.
It's got to be you, Kev. Well, listen, man, this show flew a lot faster than I expected it to. Do you want to take some questions from the crowd before we go? Are you free to answer?
That's what I'm here for.
Let's do it, man. So, okay, hey, audience, if you've got a fucking buzzer goes off, unbelievable. If you've got a question for Kev, let's drop a couple in the chat right now. We'll answer those. You know what, Kev? This is just not how I expected it to go down because I really wanted to see you under the crunch of the game try to answer that question because most people get everything wrong. That last question, I think we had Ryan McDowell. He told me last week. He said the question was, how many games has Eli Manning gone without a touchdown pass? And the answer, regular season, was 42. His answer was 0.
What?
Because he said, this is good. He said his dad always told him, if you don't know the answer, answer 1 or 0. So he went 0. I mean, I get it, right? You gotta have a fallback plan. All right, here we go. That tall guy, trying to sell high on Michael Thomas. Who should I target?
I mean, dynasty or redraft? That's kind of the big question
yeah.
here. But let's pretend. Okay, so like in a redraft, if you could get like a high-end running back for like a Javonte Williams for Michael Thomas, I'd do that all day. In Dynasty, if you could get a first for Michael Thomas, oh my God, I'd trade Michael Thomas for a first if you can get that.
I don't think you're getting a first, but I think at this point you could probably get a high second. You might be able to package him into somebody to get a first. I mean, he's playing productively enough, and for the people that don't monitor the air yards, for the people that don't monitor the opportunity that could have been the unrealized, they may not know sort of what's coming with Chris Olave next. So. I like the idea of packaging him, so I think that's somebody that I would certainly consider doing it with. From Blitzing Buzzard, Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown straight up in Dynasty?
Closer now than it was before, but still Lamb.
Okay.
Like I'm a big Lamb guy. I still believe in him. I think the early season, the target share is absolutely there. Red zone percentage is next to 0 because their offense is terrible, but Lamb should be fine. It's a very bad offense right now, but he's the guy.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's hard to get off of Lamb. I know he's falling slightly in the dynasty rankings, but again, this is a guy that's not even 24 years old yet. I think he's 23 and a half years old, younger than many of the other players around him, and unfortunately a part of a situation that's really broken. I mean, again, A.J. Brown, how many years did we concession for A.J. Brown while he was sort of underperforming in that offense? Lamb is at the mercy of this offense right now. How about this one? Drop Alec Pierce for Ashton Dulin.
Dynasty, no. Redraft, absolutely. Dulin, I think he leads the team in targets now with Michael Pittman's game missed, but like he's running a ton of routes. He has the speed. I don't know if it was you or Manchin on the Sonic Truth podcast, but you guys are the ones who I kept Dulin in my mind all these years up until this season, to where I finally drafted him in like the deepest of leagues where like I play a bunch of deep best balls. And Yes, if I win any money, it's because of you and Manchin seeing Doodlin all day. No, you weren't on him?
Kev, I can tell you for a fact it wasn't me. Have you been listening to me on this podcast? I
don't listen as often as I should.
The one that you're on right now. I have taken a couple L's over the years by leaning into the later round draft capital equates to lesser chance of success. And it hasn't failed me with Doolin. I don't care what anybody says. It's yet to fail me, and I believe that it likely still doesn't fail me from a dynasty standpoint. But like you said, again, you think about rookies, productive rookies. It's hard to just even get to 100 targets. So if Doolin's producing the way that he is, and he has that upside, and there's that learning curve for a guy like Alec Pierce, I think that makes a ton of sense. Let's see with some of these other questions here. How about right here? Is Carson Wentz an illusion like early season Sam Darnold? Sell before Philly?
I definitely think he'll struggle versus Philly. I don't think that's a question, but you look at Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, Curtis Samuel. They're getting Brian Robinson back. J.D. McKissick's a fine weapon. Their offensive line is solid. I think you look at those weapons compared to what Sam had last year and the O-line he had. I think he could be very fantasy relevant all year. He's going to rush plenty. And Sam had the, a broken neck or a broken back that kind of halted his production. So unless Wentz gets hurt again, I really think it's hard to fail fantasy-wise unless something happens.
I'm gonna click one from the Harry Snowman, but I want to address this comment. Did I type something that offended anyone? No, you didn't. I've seen your comments the whole time, but every time they come through, I've rotated topics, and I just hate to drag something from a previous topic back into the one that we're in now. So let's go. Doolin, Dortch, or Richie? See, you're on the screen now. We got it. We're here.
Wait, Richie?
I think he's talking about
Richie James.
Yeah.
Richie. Oh, no. Give me Doolin. Yeah, give me Doolin because he could actually be the wide receiver 2 on his team.
I like it.
Dortch is going to be out when Rondell's back.
Do I trade Antonio Gibson in Dynasty while his stock is higher than it was before?
Yes, if you can get comparable value, but I still think he's going to have a good year. I don't think Brian Robinson returning is going to do too much given that he's coming back from getting shot. And J.D. McKissick, Gibson's running a ton of routes too, so I don't think the passing down work's going to be too hit. I'd hold if you're trying to win now, unless you get a really good offer. But if you get it, take it.
I don't think there's a lot of history of players coming back from gunshot wounds and finding out how they performed on a field. But the fact that I think he's already training again, is that true? I think that's what they were saying, that he's back to. Is he training off the field right now?
No, he's on the field, but he's half speed,
yeah.
Is what I read.
That is so crazy, man. I'd probably curl up in the fetal position and never leave my house again. This guy's just he's tough as nails. But remember, before that happened, I think that there was a concern that we weren't going to see Antonio Gibson in this full sort of opportunity role. Then he got it and he played well. And sort of now I think he's saved himself a bit. But a majority of the offseason, people were banging the drum for Brian Robinson taking that job. Were you ever convinced that was likely? Because I thought I read a tweet from you that basically said that you weren't buying into that.
Oh, absolutely not. I thought he could absolutely take the short yardage work, in the middle of the field. He could be that in between the 20s guy, whereas Gibson's the red zone weapon, which he has been throughout the past 2 years. He has double-digit touchdowns each season. I thought Gibson's touches would go down, but his receptions would go up, or targets and receptions would go up. So everything would even out to similar production as the last 2 seasons, and he was going in the 8th round. So you were getting a massive value on Gibson. I still think you got a massive value on Gibson wherever you got him. So I'm not giving up on Gibson after Robinson's back. I think he'll be fine. I'd be buying if anybody's selling, honestly, outside of Dynasty, where again, if you do get good value, he's a running back. They get hurt a lot, and if you want to sell for picks, go ahead.
Is this good value in Dynasty? Gibson or
I'd rather
Walker?
have Gibson.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather have Gibson.
You are not. Now, I will admit, Antonio Gibson is probably one of the closest things to a Jonathan Taylor level potential in this league, where Walker, again, we don't know about the pass catching. If Walker was a more accomplished pass catcher, would that change your mind here? Is that the big delineator for you?
Yeah, it has to be the pass catching. He really has no history of it. And people say Michigan State didn't pass to their running backs much, but with the same coaching staff, if you go back 2 years before Walker was there, really, their running backs had very solid target percentages, 7.5%, 8%. Whereas with Walker, it was 4% or so. So it was a Walker issue. It wasn't a Michigan State offense issue. He was not getting targeted because he didn't earn the targets in college. I think he could be a fine NFL running back, but fantasy-wise, give me Gibson, given his pass-catching ability. And we've seen the production, too, whereas with Walker, it's theoretical.
That's fair. I can't argue the theoretical thing, but I will say a lot of people told me that A.J. Dillon wasn't going to catch passes either.
I wasn't one of those people. You can look at my tweets. I love Dillon.
Well, good,
because I call him Baby Fournette.
I love them too. And they were talking, like you were talking to the coaches at Boston College and, Gutekunst or whatever. And they were saying that like the conversation in the background was this guy has a pass catching prowess that people don't really understand quite yet. And he has more capability than he's being given credit for. So it's nice to see that sort of, unfolding at the NFL level. PBM says, what do we think about Tua, Waddle, and Hill rest of the season? I mean, you got to love all these guys, right?
Oh, 100%. Am I a little scared of Tua against the Bills this week? Absolutely. But again, it's too good to fail in terms of an offense with Waddle and Hill looking the way they are. Both of them stay healthy. Tua's going to be fringe top 12, basically.
I like it. We got one here asking about the Baltimore Ravens run game. Is the Ravens run game a product of lack of Dobbins, or do you expect them to go back to a run-heavy system?
I think it's they have very good weapons right now in Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman. Duvernay's even doing a solid job too. So I think they have an MVP caliber quarterback and they want to throw the ball. It has nothing to do with the running backs at all. We're more efficient when we throw the ball.
Yeah, I think once we see Dobbins get back in there too, though, you're going to see an explosive, assuming he comes back healthy. Is this enough time for you with the ACL tear? Because you mentioned sort of the injury timeline. He's been gone quite a while. I mean, is it still not long enough for you?
It's not just an ACL. It's his LCL and MCL, I believe he tore as well. Right. So John Harbaugh last week said he's week to week, but today he had a full practice. And Wednesday full practice isn't as meaningful as like Thursday, Friday. So we don't really know what that means. But for the most part, I don't think Dobbins is going to get a full workload until in the second half of the season, where his timeline is much closer to that full health. And Gus Edwards should be returning then as well. So it's a really sticky situation. We have to see it play out before we trust anybody in a starting lineup. That's
fair. No, I'm with it, man. And I love Dobbins. I hope Dobbins comes back healthy because the runner that we saw a few years ago was so incredibly explosive. And Dobbins, funny enough, was my comp for Kenneth Walker. A lot of similarities after contact, not really a pass catcher, had proven to be fairly durable. And so it looks like the Harry Snowman's saying he tore his hamstring as well. So if that's true, I don't even know, but it's a multitude of leg injuries. He's been out a long time. He claimed he was going to make it back by the start of the season, clearly didn't. So here we are. All right, Kev, I think you went through the gauntlet of answering questions there. So tell people where they can find you right now in the chat and people in the future that are going to listen to this podcast.
Absolutely. So my @ down here at RotoSurgeon is for Twitter. That's where honestly 95% of my content goes at this point. It's just a brain dump of whatever I see and think about. So go follow me on Twitter. That's most of my info. I put my rankings out weekly. I have my podcast, The Operating Room, Apple Pod, Spotify, wherever podcasts are available. Go check that out as well. My writing is on Rotoballer, but again, I plug it all on my Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see everything you need to see. Nate, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. Did your podcast. Figured I would hit you up and have you come on mine and do some of these social media takes because I think this is really your wheelhouse. Looking at bad takes or calling out takes that you think are fraudulent. And yeah, you're doing the Lord's work out there. Not everybody agrees with some of the things you do, and they don't always love the direction that you take them. But you've been one of, honest to God, my favorite follows on social media. And you're calculated. So anybody that wants to argue with you, they know that they're walking into a dangerous situation. Again, I think you do a really good job. And I just want more people to see that, man. So thank you for coming on, guys. Follow Kev at RotoSurgeon on Twitter. And we will be back next week on I Am Outraged.